Okay, everyone still have 4 more items to deal with before we're moving along. And the next one is the payday loan establishments. So who's going to kick us off? Is there a presentation? Ms. Fleck, when you're ready.
Through you, Chair, I'm here to answer any questions on the report.
Oh, very good. I'm sure I have some. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Davey. I am very happy to move the motion at the appropriate time. I wanted to just congratulate staff and thank staff for bringing this forward. It's going to be much needed. I'll have comments at a later time.
Oh, very good. Actually, there are no other. Okay, comments only. If you want to click in, there's no other questions. So, Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Davey, and yeah, I just want to echo the same comments. Great work, and it was much needed. It seemed like we were looking at some form of imbalance, and hopefully this will create a balance, and I think it'll do the job that it's supposed to do. Thank you.
Very good. Before I go back to Councillor Marsh, who had a big hand in this as well, I'll just comment briefly. I am fully in support of this. I don't think it's any secret that I'm no fan of these establishments. I'm happy to see it restricted, happy to see the fees going up. I wish we could add a percentage to the late fee even, but we'll let that go for now. But I will certainly be supporting. Councillor Marsh.
Yes, perhaps that'll be an amendment later. So, I just think it's really unfortunate that we have to play a role, because in a country known worldwide for our top quality banking system, I think payday loans should be entirely unnecessary. I feel our banks and credit unions have a role to play in offering fair and equitable financial products and services that cater to a wide range of needs for all Canadian residents. That said, the City of Kitchener needs to do our part to play a role in consumer protection, to try to limit the number of establishments in our community. So with that, I move this recommendation.
Very good, thank you. Those in favour? And none are opposed. Very good, carries unanimously. Okay, moving along. Item number 7, Integrity Commissioner Advice on the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act and Code of Conduct Housekeeping Amendments. I'm noticing there is no staff presentation for this, so any questions? Councillor Gazzola.
I was going to move it.
Okay, moved by Councillor Gazzola. Not seeing any questions or comments. Those in favour? And opposed? I believe that carries unanimously. And next, Kitchener Economic Development Strategy. We will have a presentation on this. Or maybe not. Corey. Oh, just in time. Well, actually slightly late, but we'll let you go on that one.
You can blame our CAO. He stopped me in the hallway for some urgent business. Mr. Chair and members of committee, I'm excited to be here today because we get to kickstart what I think is one of the most exciting and enjoyable processes that certainly our team gets to go to, and I think Council as well, which is to begin to imagine what our city can become over the next number of years and think through the ways in which the city can help make that happen. Our current Make Kitchener strategy ends at the end of this year, so our goal is by December to work with Council, our community, all of our stakeholders, business leaders, to develop the next Make Kitchener 2.0. Just for those who maybe are less familiar with our strategy, it's a little bit different than most, say, action plans or strategies that the city produces. Because if you think about it, the outcomes are, new businesses, new jobs, new buildings, new festivals, new vibrancy, most of which isn't actually the work that we actually do. It's us supporting and enabling, encouraging and inspiring our partners to do much of the work. So this strategy is very unique in that it's really not just about what the city does, but it's about how we help others. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to two colleagues. Lauren Schlumsky, who is our economic researcher. Sorry, I got that title wrong here. The economic development analyst. And Leah, who is our economic researcher, who are going to be doing most of the body of work that you're going to get to see will be all of their wonderful work over the next few months. So I'm going to turn over to them to lead you through the next part.
Great, thank you, Corey. Over the past 15 years, Kitchener has been a city of change, and our approach to building a strong economy has transformed over time. I wanted to first walk you through some of the transformations and some of the history and the focus that our past strategies have taken. So starting off in the early 2000s, Kitchener was faced with some major economic issues. At the time, we were shedding jobs by the hundreds, factories were closing down, and we could not attract anybody to invest in our downtown. This was essentially a crisis, and we knew if we did not act, that our community would be faced with a lot of trouble over the long term. As a response, our community created EDIF, the Economic Development Investment Fund, that was a strategy to help fund key investments in the knowledge economy, as well as in downtown revitalization. The strength of this approach was its laser focus on two clear-cut goals, which over time enabled our community members to understand our vision, but even more importantly, to see themselves as part of the solution with tangible goals that they could understand. A few years later, in 2011, the Kitchener Economic Development Strategy broadened its focus to 5 core themes for a diverse and stable economy. This process started to bring in more people and engage more partners to work with to develop these goals. KEDS 2011 recognized that new jobs, talent attraction, and vibrant cities are created when people with great ideas get to dream together. Fast forward again to our most recent strategy, Make It Kitchener, which was developed throughout 2015. This strategy extended even further to identify 54 different action items that were grouped by 6 fundamental themes to build a dynamic economy and a great city within which to live. This latest strategy proved to be a powerful motivational tool to empower people and their passions. To date, this strategy saw the largest numbers of partners and champions coming together to achieve its actions through a 40-40-20 split. By that I mean that 40% of those actions were projects that the city initiated and took on and were leaders for. Another 40% were built through critical partnerships with community members and institutions. And finally, a 20% split were tackled by the amazing city builders throughout our city that had a great idea and found support to make it happen. Now bringing us to today. What we've learned is that our city's economic development strategies have matured over time. What we have observed as outcomes of all of this work is that we now have 3,000 new residential units under construction in the downtown right now. We have 200 plus technology companies operating downtown, and we have seen a cumulative investment of $1.6 billion in construction since EDIF was first established. And beyond that, an additional $1.1 billion in construction right now this year. These are monumental changes in our city's landscape. And ultimately, this is what an economic development agenda that is carried out over the course of 16 years should do. It should start focused and over time broaden and mature and bring in more and more people. Now, historically, our economic development strategies have taken place and been focused to a 4-year time frame, though we will be encouraging people through this process to think about the long term, to think beyond 4 years. We know that our economy continues to change and that new trends and challenges will emerge, from automation, artificial intelligence, to changes in the retail industry and the reality of having an aging population. Now is the time to engage our community and to challenge us to seek to understand if we should continue to broaden our scope, or is this the time to seed the next core areas of focus that will have multi-generational impacts. And now, with that background and history and evolution in mind, I would like to introduce my colleague Leah Connor, who will be walking us through this year's process.
Thank you. In any strategic process, community engagement is important, not just to support idea generation, but also as a community building tool to inspire, challenge, enable our community to grow a workforce, bring our city to life, and help make Kitchener a city for everyone. With the initial consultation already started, our goal is to facilitate a series of roundtable discussions, workshops, and one-on-one meetings with stakeholders, asking them to think big and to be brave dreamers. We recognize that the best way to invite people into the process of forming our next strategic action is to have as much face-to-face interaction as possible, gathering feedback and ideas from a wide cross-section of interest in our community. In addition to targeted stakeholder sessions, public-facing consultation will commence over the summer through a variety of methods, leveraging planned events as venues for feedback, using online tools such as social media, and creative methods such as an accessible community chalkboard, not just asking for an idea, but asking why it's important. Often the why is where we begin to see the overlapping patterns of what truly matters. Considerations will be taken regarding potential obstacles to participation. We will be asking digestible questions that are relevant and meaningful, further keeping physical and social barriers in mind and time constraints of different stakeholders. We will consider the nature of engagements in order to increase accessibility. In the fall, we will host a culminating event to share our community's brave ideas and let them weigh in on how we might prioritize our actionable goals. The following slides will express examples of topics we anticipate our stakeholders could identify as important areas of focus. These are some things we've generally been hearing from our networks. And again, this is not a full picture of the salient themes relevant to our economic development strategy, but merely a snapshot. So a familiar concept that we expect to hear is attracting and retaining diverse workforce through nurturing a community that is a compelling place to live and play and work. We've also heard about the importance of growing our businesses. We now have the opportunity to not only be a startup city, but a scale-up city, creating an environment where businesses can expand and thrive. To create a city that's truly for everyone, there are vital challenges that we as a community must face. These challenges present us with the opportunity to innovate, whether it's tackling affordable housing, championing inclusion. Kitchener's strength lies in its ability to empower change makers and create an ecosystem of innovation. Our city has become a place to make memories, and there are further opportunities to enrich our social connections through the activation of underused spaces, creating a 24/7 city that is teeming with activity and energy. Again, these are just some topics we look forward to hearing about from our community stakeholders. The core deliverables after the consultation process will include a summary of brave ideas accompanied with analytic rigor to enable council in determining where we place our focus. Draft and final strategies based on our community's vision will be presented to council for approval by the end of this year.
So just in closing, what can council expect to have happen, and ultimately what do we hope to deliver to you in December? First, in terms of the strategy, should, much like we mentioned before, provide opportunities for the city to lead initiatives, but also seeking out partnership opportunities, and just areas where we know that city builders themselves are already willing to build, and we just need to help them get there. And lastly, what will a good strategy look like come December? If we've done our work properly, it would do this, which is to really create a platform to mobilize our community of city builders, much the way we've done in the past. That it identifies key areas of focus that you as a council are really interested in us investing our time and efforts in, and that ideally that the work that we do isn't just about short-term impact, but really is about long-term impact and change. So with that, we are open to questions from committee, and we're interested in your thoughts on these three questions in particular. Are you supportive of the approach we're planning to take? Are you supportive of the goals? I'll flip back to them. And then do you agree that we should be challenging our community to think beyond 4 years? So with that, welcome any comments and questions you have.
Thank you, Corey, Lauren, and Leah, for your presentation. Very exciting times. There are 3 people in the queue at the moment, but I expect it'll start up to 5. There we go. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Davey, and thanks, Leah, Lauren, and Corey, for your presentation. I really like the tree thing. I don't know if that was done in-house or anything, but that was really, really nice to see. I guess the questions that, and I'm prepared to move the recommendations when this is ready. The question I was wanting to ask is somewhat on the side of this is the funding for economic development, because we were talking about this the other day, last committee meeting, and what are we going to do when Edith is completed with the payments, and are we going to is your staff and yourself going to come with the recommendations for a funding source, like maybe an EDIF 2 or whatever that may be? Is that something along the horizon? Because I think personally, if we're looking at a multi-generational impact here, we're going to need a funding source.
Through the chair, yes. The goal is, I'll say yes in the fact of what we propose to you in December, we want to make sure is financially doable. So obviously there's a level of reasonability and capacity that will come into play, but yes, if there is an opportunity for us to seize, we at least want to present that to council, have you understand what the financial impacts of that are, and if it's something you want to pursue, then finding the means to do that. So yes, there will be a financial plan attached to our strategy.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, just before you continue, if you wouldn't mind just flipping the screen back to the questions, it might be easier. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Hernandez.
And okay, my last question is, being around here now since 2010 and seeing from our first economic strategy and from the roots to where we're seeing now to the tree branches, and obviously not every suggestion or need that we wanted was fulfilled. Are we going to look at something to fill some of those gaps that may have not been filled, in particular, and if they're still relevant? Is that something that we can focus on? Like an example, like what I'm thinking about is the need for a convention center because that's still something that we hear all the time.
What I would suggest is that, through the chair, is that, Lee only described 4 areas of focus. We expect through our consultation there may be dozens of areas of focus, but our plan is to apply a level of analytical rigor to each of those so that when we come back to you, so if there are areas that are gaps that are not being filled, to identify that to you, but also give you some ideas as to the kind of impact if we were to address it, what it would mean, and you can then evaluate that based on other areas of focus so that you can have a kind of fulsome picture. But yes, I think at this point, there's no idea too far out there that we won't at least certainly analyze and see if it's an opportunity.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Rabinovich.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the three of you for the presentation. Few quick questions and comments with respect to your questions of council. First of all, in terms of the time frame, I think you need to have a longer term horizon for pieces of this because we always need to be looking long term. But I think fundamentally we probably should be looking at 4-year cycles to coincide with term of council, the updating of the broader community strategic plan, and so on. So I think, things like EDIF were an example of how we took that long, 10-year sort of analysis of things, but also always broke it up into the cycles of council. So I think we need to factor that into it. I'm not clear here where external factors are going to be researched and considered, because I think sometimes we've been successful, and sometimes when you're successful you also start drinking your own Kool-Aid a little bit. So how are we going to, what degree of research are we going to do looking at what's happening elsewhere across Canada and across North America in terms, and sometimes in some cases beyond, in terms of communities we're competing against and some things that maybe we need to look at further?
Through the chair. So some examples of the types of ways where we may do a lot of analytical work to support some of these things is once our community has started to identify some core themes or some core focus areas for us to look at, we can start to apply some economic and financial and economic analysis tools to start to look at what are the specific industries or sectors or clusters where we're particularly strong in relative to other communities, or what other tools do we have to look at how we compare against other benchmark communities, what other tools are out there. And so that is something that staff would endeavor to do as a result of some of the core themes that come out. And then we'd be able to provide some of that information and provide back to the community saying, this is what we've found, and then be able to kind of work on developing solutions with those communities, with our community members based on that information.
Okay. One of the things we may also want to look at doing is partnering with U of W. I mean, they have a great faculty, as you know, in economic development, and they, some of the researchers are in there may be able to help with some of that. one of the areas, and you probably won't be surprised to hear me raising this, but where does downtown recruitment fit in all of this in terms of dealing with the vacancies and so on? How are we going to deal with that as part of the consultation process and implementation plan?
Through the chair, so it's part of the downtown strategy that council approved that still has some lifetime, so it is still an area of focus that we'll be diving into. So even if it doesn't come out heavily, which I suspect it will, so I think the entire retail conversation will come out loud and clear through this consultation, not just downtown, but citywide. So one is there is a body of work already going, and I would be shocked if it isn't an area of focus that comes out from our community.
Okay.
And even if it isn't, it'll be something that we'll be looking at from a staff level anyway. So
that's good to hear, because if not, I can assure you we'll be looking at it. The last point I want to make is, while obviously the urban center, continues to be a priority, because that's just the reality of what's happening in cities across North America. I think we can't lose sight of what's happening in suburbia. In particular, I think of underutilized retail strip malls. We're seeing some of them that are revitalizing themselves, like the one in Pioneer Park, as an example. But there's all sorts of others, like the one on Greenbrook, and also I think of Krug Street Plaza. I mean, there's tons of them around the city, and even strip malls on some of our arterials that really are going to need to be rethought, I think, going forward. And this strategy needs to deal with that around the city. Do we see that? Is there a place for that in here?
So through the chair, I can certainly confirm that is a core theme that we have been hearing already through early consultation. And so that is certainly something that we will endeavor to look into. So, safe and thriving neighborhoods throughout our entire community, rather than just focusing on one key area, is something that we're hearing, and we'll expect to hear more about from our community members through this process.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, I just have a question. First, I agree with 1, 2, and 3. But what do you call them? What is a city builder?
Through the chair, what we mean by city builders are really kind of average citizens and people in this community that have a vision to do something great here and want to make that happen. So these can be community members, these could be developers, these could be business partners, but really we just mean that title to empower those in our community that have a vision for a great new idea here.
And have you recruited these people, or how do you recruit them, or so you get a hat that says I'm a city builder? No, seriously.
Through the chair, sometimes it's recruitment. Most of it is us sharing the vision that we as a city are aspiring to, and the work that we're doing. Typically, naturally, then the city builders find us if we haven't found them already. To give you a perfect example, if you look back at Edith, when we said as a city, we said we're going to focus on revitalizing downtown and the knowledge economy. It started off with some very key core partners like the university, but very quickly, as people understood the direction and the vision, they came and found us, and sometimes we had to go find some folks to help us along the way. But I think that's what a successful ECDEV strategy does, is it creates a vision that, I say it's more of a platform than anything. It's a place that invites people to share the vision that you have as a council and want to be active players in bringing that to fruition.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Johnston?
Yes, thank you. And thank you very much for the presentation. I really, to piggyback on Councillor Ioannidis' comments, I love how you've presented it. And I think it's going to be really easy to take to the community because of the way that you presented it there. And I think it's really important for us to go back and think historically about how you've outlined this. The vision of past councils to do really exciting and cutting edge things. I know that when Edith went through, that was controversial at the time, and the leadership that was shown from that previous council with the leadership of Mayor Carl Zaire at the time, that was huge, and it wasn't something that easily went through. But the changes and the opportunities that putting that money in place and putting that faith in our community back then has just made such a difference here. So it's that's pretty exciting. I mean, we can also point to the expressway as a huge decision that was made by councils long ago, that it really was a great decision for our community, as well as the LRT. We're definitely gonna see that. So I'm supportive of the questions that you've answered. In terms of the questions that you posed here, in terms of having a horizon beyond 4 years, I agree that it should go along with the terms of council, but I really think that whenever we're looking at big decisions, big visionary decisions, that it needs, I'm happy to have it kind of expand beyond that as well. To piggyback on Mayor Verbanovic's comments about the plazas and that in kind of the outlying edges of our community, I often hear from people in different parts of my ward that they would all love to have a Belmont Village in their part of the ward. So it's certainly something that people do love. And people want those community gathering spaces. They want the little coffee shops. They want the neat little places to go in the outlying areas. So certainly, if we can keep that in our radar, is important too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you to all three of you. I started working downtown 15 years ago, and when I moved down here with the record, the major consensus was, oh my gosh, what have we gotten into down here? And to see how downtown has evolved and grown, and it's just an amazing place to be. And I'm enlightened to see Midtown develop, and I'm happy to see the East End get a little more attention. I do agree that the suburbs have been somewhat neglected, and I know you can't do everything all at once. So I do agree with all three of your questions here. Yes, agree with all three of your questions. Say yes to all of it. I kind of echo what Mayor Barry says, that 4 years, maybe every 4 years, a cycle with council. I think that gives better trajectory as we go forward. I would like to see certainly more retail recruitment, not just downtown, but in the suburbs as well. So I really hope that Make It Kitchener, you've done a fantastic job of the downtown, and I think we need to keep going there, but I think we do need more focus on the suburbs, and I think there's lots of ability to find city builders in the suburbs by just the Love My Hood, the Neighbors Day, all this kind of initiatives that the city has gone. We can kind of build on that. So well done on all counts. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair Davey. I concur with a lot of my colleagues. I really agree that this is a good strategy. I want to know, it's called Make It Kitchener 2.0, so how is it similar to the previous strategy, and then what are you anticipating will be the differences?
Through the chair, so it was interesting. I think when I talk to the community and colleagues and our partners, their interpretation of Make It Kitchener is that if you want to make a difference in the world and you want to make Kitchener a better place, Kitchener is the place to do it because this community helps you, right? So I think that is the spirit of our community. I think that's the spirit of Make It Kitchener. So I think that spirit will live on. What we choose to do inside of that spirit, I think, is completely up for discussion. Yeah, there may be some continuations, there may be new things. What I would say is let's keep our minds open to what the outcome could be and make those decisions where we come. But I think if we can stick to the spirit, then I think that's the key from my standpoint. Okay, and so when we did the previous consultation for the Make It Kitchener Strategy 1.0, it was called, I remember, Ideas of the Brave, and I'm just wondering, when you consult with some of the same folks, I guess and they might say different things, or they might say some of the same things. I want to know, do you anticipate
being able to gather the information and present it in a different way that might make it easier to achieve measurable goals. You know, I think that one of the challenges was that some of the goals were less measurable, and I'm just wondering, what is your strategy for that?
So through the chair, one of the things that we do certainly have top of mind when working towards this culminating symposium is basically to take a lot of the lessons learned that we will learn throughout this summer, and then applying kind of the next phase of that symposium would essentially be about testing some of those ideas, starting to figure out what is it about that could make it work, and also elevating those types of questions so that it's not just about idea generation, but it's also about understanding why, or the principles behind some of these things that motivate individual people. And I think through that, we should help to kind of come up with some very, very core fundamental themes that are around why these things are so important to our community members.
Okay. Great.
I might add one point, and to your point, I think what we've learned in the past is if you ask a question, a big, broad question like, what do you think about the economy in the future? You tend not to get, that's a tough question for a lot of people to answer, and I think what we've learned is we need to pose things in a way that they can feel, touch, and see, and really understand what something might look like or what the impact might be so they can really give us meaningful feedback.
Sounds good. I agree the plan should have a very long-term outlook, but with measurable, attainable goals along the way towards getting there. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree with a lot of the comments already given. Really optimistic in our endeavor to improve upon the economic development strategy that we have already. I think the consultation process is key in capturing what needs to be done. And like the earlier comments, I think it has to be forward-thinking, and anything that's going to be transformational can't be looked upon in a very small scope of time. You know, it's a generational impact, but at the same time, we need to ensure that our strategy is nimble enough that we are sensitive to market changes. We can't predetermine what the economy is going to be 10 years from now. We constantly have to update. So every 4-year cycle is good as building upon the long-term strategy. So, and I think that's something that we have been doing. So that's something that's working. So we shouldn't deviate from that too much. The other thing is, so I'm supportive of the goals, and as for the consultation approach, I'm really looking forward to seeing what type of partnerships. Because if we are reflective on our successes from the initial economic development strategy, anything that gave positive results or significant results came out of partnerships. So let's focus on those and capture in consultation with our partners that we've already have successes with, or others that we likely could potentially leverage on. And at the same time, we may need to ensure that we're reflective of the larger voice of our community, and I think those that are sitting around this table are representative of that community. So ensuring from the public consultation process that council has a role to play through a strategic planning process before the final items or the strategy comes forward, it's better. A lot of times making changes or just through comments at the end is not enough of an opportunity, but being part of the process early on enough that we can build upon the consultation that we're receiving from the key stakeholders of the community, but at the same time ensure that there's a benefit by the wider community is key. And that's why I think the strategy needs to be reflective, not just in a focused geographical area like we were because it was necessary of our downtown, but the wider community, like connection with not just the development community and saying those that are developing, but those that are property land owners, right? So, someone who owns a plaza somewhere in a suburb, they don't consider themselves as a developer, but ensuring that there's a mechanism that we tie into them and seeing what their struggles are so we can continue to economic development in that area, in that neighborhood that's outside the periphery of the downtown is key aspect of the next strategy. So yeah. Otherwise, I think you guys are doing phenomenal work.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You know, if I may, through the chair, our intention too is that after the following the symposium is not to just come back to you and say, here, council, here's the strategy and let's go, but actually to engage you on how do we prioritize from what will be probably a many number of areas of focus, and really work with you guys to get your input on where should we focus before we actually come to the final strategy. So I very much agree that that we'll be walking step for step with you guys through this process.
So, and that's important. And one more thing I really want to touch on is I think Councillor Ioannidis has already said it best, that just talking about lofty ideas is, it's fine without really putting a tangible price tag to it. And although the final strategy will articulate exactly how we're going to pay for it, I think we need to get the support from the community and talking about, well, this is the vision that you're saying, ideas, but at the same time, could you be supportive if from the initial EDIF fund that we have established, if said percentage will continue on to fund a long-term economic development strategy? Because at the end of the day, we have to decide how we allocate that funding. And getting that assurance and support from the stakeholder will help to make that decision around this table better.
It appears I'm the only one left, so my only first question actually, under financial implications, it says that it's already, the costs are already approved, which is fine, but do you know offhand the dollar value associated with the consultation process?
Sorry, your mic is kind of, from this point I don't hear you very clearly.
Pardon me, under financial implications, you don't detail the amount budgeted for the consultation process. Do you know that figure offhand?
Through the chair, so it's through the reserve, and I believe it was approved in last year's budget. I believe 30,000, but I could be off base on that one. But I think it would be approximately 30,000. Not to say we will spend all of that, but we've got an allocation in the reserve.
No worries, that's less than I expected. To your questions, I'm definitely supportive of the consultation approach. I do also think it's very, very important that you make sure when the data comes back, it's separated in terms of the sectors, right? So I want to make sure that I can refer to people that have run or are running a successful business, what their needs are versus someone who's more concerned about talent retention, that sort of thing. Because I think we need to make sure that we don't spend all of it or put all of our focus into only talent attraction and retention without worrying about the business needs of the community. I'm supportive of the goals as well. The only thing that I've said time and time again is focus, focus, focus. One thing that I found interesting through the EDIF process is the biggest bang came from one of the smallest expenditures in the Communitech partnership. I thought that was critical, and I also I'm cognizant of the fact that it was a time that manufacturing was essentially dying, and my concern looking forward is that you have to let some things die in terms of where we're going, and the one thing that has been talked about a few times now is retail. I'm concerned about if we try and revive something that Amazon may kill retail, and we have to deal with that in terms of, retail will become more restaurants and coffee shops than clothing and shoes and that sort of thing. So I think we have to be careful not to, throw good money after bad. And lastly, I think the ideas of the brave boldness, we need to talk to some people or look at some projections into where future economies will be. A lot of them are simple. They're out there, artificial intelligence, the carbon economy, all these things are going to be huge growth areas, and I think we're well positioned to take advantage of them now. But hopefully we'll get some professional information somewhere along the way about where we think these things are going to be. Like, what are the impacts of driverless vehicles? Are they going to come in the next 5, 10, 15 years? We don't know. Last thing, your last question, Horizon Beyond 4 years, I think so for sure. I do think we need to check in once in a while. If there's any disruptive technologies or planning, that sort of thing that comes by, we might need to check in earlier than that. But I do agree with the idea of a long-term vision. I think it's appropriate as well because, frankly, make it Kitchener 1.0, I think, could have had traction going a fair bit in the future. So while I think this is warranted, I do think we can go longer into the future. So there is a recommendation, and Councillor Ioannidis moved it. I think sort of our comments were already encapsulated in our questions, so I will ask the question. Those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Good work. Thank you. Where are we here? Okay, last item, Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund Supplementary Agreements. There is no presentation, so staff are only here to answer questions. Councillor Gazolt.
Yeah, you speak here of 95 capital projects. Have you given council a list of those projects with some estimate of costs involved? Do we have that list? Or?
Mr. Golden.
Through the chair, the list is actually, most of it is posted online through the Stormwater Management Master Plan, Implementation Plan.
So it's readily available there?
Correct.
Okay. I have trouble sometimes with our website. My only other question, difficult not to support here, but what's here. But, a couple of weeks ago, and I've asked this of our treasurer, chief financial officer, a couple of weeks ago we had a infrastructure deficiency for stormwater management of $90 million. As a result of this, is it fair to say that that deficiency is now down to $40 million?
Mr. Golden?
Yes,
Mr. Lautenbach, you want to take that one?
Through the chair, it is reducing the infrastructure deficit, but it's not exactly a one-to-one relationship. I'd have to double check the calculations for how the deficit was calculated, but I would estimate it'll reduce it around $30 million.
So in other words, some of these projects are brand new things that we hadn't contemplated?
Mr. Lautenbach, do you want to add?
So through the chair, confirming with staff, the deficit would be reduced by about $41.5 million was the amount that was included in that was related to this additional work. It was a 10-year gap, and so some of the work that was proposed through the Stormwater Master Plan was shifted into that 10-year window, which was why the gap was as high as it was at $90 million. This will reduce it down as part of the additional funding that we'll be receiving.
So we'll be close to $50 million.
The final number will be confirmed as indicated through the strat session, but it will be reduced.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing, Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, I just want to give kudos to staff for what an amazing feat to get $50 million from the federal government. Congratulations. And this is very exciting for our whole community. So thank you.
It's only $49.99 million. There is no one else in the queue. I just want to congratulate staff as well. This is quite an achievement. It's actually truly impressive, and if I'm being honest, takes a lot of load off of all of our collective shoulders, so thank you very much. I don't think I have a mover for this yet. Someone want to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Galloway-Seelock. Those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Good work. That concludes Finance and Corporate Services Committee. We will begin... (3:30). We actually can bump that up, apparently, if we want to. Do you want to get right into it? Sorry. Oh, if you want to have a break, we can have a break too. Okay, 10-minute break and we will reconvene.
That phone kills me.